I'm new to this board. I have a second grader and a pre-K-er. So we'll have a kindergartner and a third grader next year.
Thanks. Allison?
Hi, I'm Allison Nicholson. I have a fifth grader, and this is something like my, I don't know, 8th year because I have a 7th grader.
Thanks, Allison.
Uh-huh.
Jack?
Jack Davis. I have a first grader in Ms. Dos Santos' class, and this is my second year on the SCC.
Thanks. Diane?
Hi, I teach 3rd grade special education at Emerson.
Thanks. Trisha?
Hi, I'm Trisha Reynolds. I am new to the SCC this year, and I have a kindergartner.
Thanks. Tracy?
Hi, my name's Tracy. I have a kindergartner as well, and I am new this year as well.
Thanks. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Lou. I teach 3rd grade dual language, and I'm just here to support teachers through the SIC. And Jana Feiner-Frock wants to be let in.
Oh,
She's sending me a text. Sorry, she's in the waiting room.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Jojo?
Hi, I hope my audio is working. I'm Jojo Liu. I have a 3rd grader in the blended 3rd, 4th grade with Miss Baby.
Thanks, Jojo. Jared?
Hi, I'm Jared Pella, and I have a kindergartner.
Thank you. Bianca?
Hi, I'm Bianca Shepard. This is my first year in the SCC, and I have a 2nd grader and a 1st grader.
Thank you. Mindy?
My name is Mindy Cook. This is my 2nd year on the committee, and I have a 3rd grader.
Thanks. Jana, sorry I left you hanging.
It's cool. Sorry, I was late. I'm Jana Feiner-Frock. I teach 2nd grade. Hi.
Hi. Jolie?
Hi, sorry, I'm trying to get my video to work. I'm Jolie Breitling. I'm new this year as well. I have a kindergartner.
Great, thank you. Laurie?
Hello, I'm just visiting this evening, so thanks for inviting me. I live just a block away from the school, and my kids are far past elementary school.
Laurie is, thank you. Laurie is going to be our first speaker here to talk about CERT in a little bit. I'll ask April and then Sam to go, and then we can kick off our agenda.
Hi, I'm April Reynolds. I'm the principal at Emerson.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Samuel.
Samuel Hanson. I'm your Board of Education representative for Precinct 5, which is more or less the same as City Council District 5, although it has a little bit of the west side that council district doesn't have. I should also mention that my replacement, starting in the beginning of the new year, has been elected. His name is Mohammed Bayed, and he'll do a great job, I'm sure. So I can talk more about that later if you want, but we should probably start inviting him to these meetings as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Samuel. And thank you for your service on the board. We appreciate it. So I think we need a motion to approve the last meeting minutes. They are both on our school website and on the shared drive that all of the SCC members have access to. So, and I think we need a motion.
Yeah, so they're not on the school. They're not on the school website yet, but they will be when they are approved.
Okay.
I'll motion to approve
the minutes. Thank you. I need a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jack. Any opposed? Great. The minutes are approved. April, do you have a principal's report for us?
I do. It's pretty short, but I can't remember when we met last. I was looking through my calendar. I thought, wow, okay. One thing that's happened is we did have our virtual Halloween kind of parade or posting on Canvas for kids. So students sent in entries, so it could be them dressed up in a costume. It could be an activity their family did. Teachers dressed up and office staff dressed up, and we posted all that online. So Amy helped us with that. It was kind of an unusual Halloween, but it was fun. And it was fun to see some of our special education students come in and they had costumes on. I was like, wow, it is, you know, today would be Halloween. So that was kind of a fun way to do that remotely. Right now we are in our annual food drive. We've done this for as long as I've been here, and I think before then, Josh Craner kind of takes on hosting or sponsoring that. And before we worked with the U, but this year we're just working directly with the Utah Food Bank to collect food before the Thanksgiving holiday. And so parents there can leave stuff kind of in between the glass doors at the front office, or on our website there's a GoFundMe option where you can just contribute some money for that. And so far, I think we had enough in the donations to pay for 1,400 meals. So we're just trying to, you know, contribute to our community and do what we can to help the food bank. And so we're trying to keep that tradition going this year. Looks a little different, but we're hoping to get a lot of donations. Another thing that will be coming up is our Snowball Holiday Giving project, where we take care of our families in need. And so Zoe is coordinating that, but we will have something posted online, and then we'll be getting information from families in terms of things that they need, and then parents can donate, and then we're going to order things from Amazon and have them delivered to the homes. So I'm not sure all the details of that. We're doing it differently, but that information will be coming out as well. So trying to take care of our families and our community best we can. So those were the 3 things I had on my list. Do you have any questions about those?
No, thank you. I expect we'll see those. I've been downloading and saving copies of the eaglet in the shared drive as well. I know you're all on the email list, but sometimes it's nice to have them all in one place. So I'm sure we'll see them there as well. So thanks, April.
April, I have a quick question about the snowball, or whatever it's called. How does the school identify those families in need that receive help?
Zoe usually has some information. We also take information from teachers, or if families have reached out to us, or like Operation School Bell or other kind of, you know, student support programs. We have them kind of on the list, and then we call and check in. It could be that someone has just let us know that a family's having a hard time. We add them to the list. So Linda collects that information, and so does Zoe. And also teachers provide information as well. So if anybody knows of folks who need help, let us know, and then we reach out to the family and see how we can support them.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions for April? Okay, April, can you give us an SIC report, or maybe one of the other teachers?
Yeah, I think one of our teachers can do that.
I'm willing to do the SIC unless somebody wants to jump in. If we remember everything, hop in if I'm forgetting anything.
All right, thanks,
we talked about the importance of getting something for art so that we could have the kids submit their art, because we're worried that for the art festival we're not going to have for art night we won't have enough art to use. So we're hoping that kids will get better at uploading and taking pictures of that. it is kind of amazing what young kids can do. They're actually probably better than their parents sometimes at taking a picture. So, I mean, don't think your kindergartner or your first grader can't take a picture, because they can. So we talked about that. We talked about the food drive and the snowball. We talked about making plans of returning to school and how we're going to do that safely. And, you know, we all have our concerns as teachers about that. What else did we talk about? We talked about parking lot space. And was there anything else that we forgot? That was pretty much the conversation. We spent a long time talking about how we were going to get things to families safely, especially since we know that with the current COVID numbers that things are not going to be very pretty in December, sadly. So
since you brought that up, the return to school, I know the school board has been having discussions about the younger grades returning. Do we have a plan for that here at Emerson? And maybe that's more of a question for April than you, I don't know.
I actually put that as the last agenda item for today because it was a very lengthy board meeting.
Okay, cool.
And I'm sure there's plenty to talk about. So if you don't mind, we'll leave it there. Thanks.
All right, and then a couple other things. We did talk about school pictures. Linda is getting something scheduled with Life Touch. Well, we will have a Wednesday when kids can come in by appointment, and also I'll open the building on a Saturday so working families can come with an appointment time and get a school picture from Life Touch. So we're working on getting that scheduled. Yeah, we're trying to get the tree removed from our parking lot, the one that fell on our teacher's car, unfortunately. Still laying out there. So.
It is gone.
Moved today.
It got moved today.
It was there this morning when I ran up to the portable, so they must have come after that. So that's awesome. And yeah, we did talk about plans for how school will look when we bring kids back. And we did talk about the internet or people experiencing some choppiness in the morning in their Zoom meetings. And that is actually not a bandwidth issue, it's an application issue. So it's a Zoom problem that we're trying to navigate. But those are the other things that were on the agenda.
Thanks. Any questions about any of the SIC items? Is there like minutes or agendas from those meetings that are publicly available?
They're not publicly available. They are provided to the faculty, but they're not posted on our website.
Great, thank you. Anything from the PTA?
I guess I'll speak, but we did go ahead and order the signs for Emerson, and so we should be getting those in probably about a week for all the people that have donated and are entitled to a yard sign. So we'll be able to get that rectified pretty quick. And I don't know if you can hear me okay. I'm trying to use my earbuds.
No, that was great.
Oh, okay.
We're all just staring at you blankly. I know that's hard when everyone's being polite. That's awesome.
Can anyone hear me?
Anything else from the PTA? Yearbooks? Was that a discussion?
Do you want me to? I have my PTA folder too. I'm just they did discuss the yearbook, and I think right now we're leaning toward not providing yearbooks just because of money in the budget. Just because they haven't been able to do fundraising like they wanted to, and also the concern about how we would put it together. Last year we had a faculty member and students that were on the yearbook committee, and that would be really difficult to do remotely. And also the lack of photographs available. So that's kind of what they're considering there in terms of the yearbook. They did talk a little bit about the budget and what that's looking like, and they wanted as much money as possible to go back to supporting teachers in the classroom with remote tools or virtual field trips or things like that. So that's going to be their higher priority than, for example, the yearbook, which is, you know, is different this year. We talked about and thanked Sue Yin for coordinating the Day of the Dead, you know, celebration virtually, and she collaborated with Annie Platt, our art teacher, and also Maddie Judge, who's our garden educator, and they came together to create the Nicho in a Box projects for kids, and we thought that was a big success, and we appreciated that. They're also trying to arrange for classroom liaisons. There are a few teachers who still do not have somebody assigned, so they talked about that. And also the upcoming reflections entries are due this Friday, so we're not sure how that will look. Everything's submitted electronically, but they've been getting information out to people about the reflections this year. So that's what I have in my notes.
Thank you.
April, I think didn't they also change the due date for the Nicho contest to the 13th, which I guess is this Friday, because they hadn't had a lot of people enter. So just good as you talk to parents to say that you can still submit those through Friday. And I think there's some prizes and $100 maybe. And
they're doing a contest. They have some gift cards from is it Cookie Cutters or whatever, the haircut place?
Yeah, I think
and so they had some gift cards to provide for kids. And I don't have the date in my notes, but I do remember them saying something about that. They were trying to get more submissions.
And then,
sorry, the email we received did say they were extending it to the 13th.
13th, okay.
And then they also, the other thing I would add is just, they're still looking for volunteers, and they're basically saying, like, if anything happens at PTA this year, it's because there's going to be a parent who steps up and takes ownership over it. So like the yearbook, right? Like if there was a parent who like cared deeply about that and said, I want to do the yearbook, I want to step up, it could probably happen. But, you know, I feel like a lot of the PTA meeting is like everybody's super overwhelmed. They're just trying to get through virtual schooling, and so everything is looking different, and there's a lot less, you know, volunteer participation of people really wanting to own a certain thing and see it through.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks Allison for adding that.
Just a side note, the link on the school website about the Nicho contest is not working. There's like a link that says click here for more information. I was trying to go on there to figure out the deadline, and it's not a good link.
Okay, I'll let Amy know about that.
I was trying to go on and donate for the food drive, and mine was having some link issues. It might just because I was having issues with my computer that day. Is everybody able to do you guys know if that link is working? Because I was worried that that wasn't working either.
It's a good question.
It looks like I'm able to get to it, click donate without shopping, and then it takes me to like where I can choose an amount.
Okay.
All right, so it's just the Nicho one. I'm just sending Amy an email right now. The other one's working okay?
Yeah, it seemed like it's working now anyway. Okay, thanks. So one last point of business before we jump into our guest speaker, which is that we still have 11 of 12 SEC seats filled. So we do need one either volunteer or recruit to fill out the parent representation on the SCC. So I don't know if any of you recruited people who are on the call today, or if anyone who's on the call wants to take a seat on the SCC. Otherwise, we'll need to do a little bit of internal recruiting amongst our members and across our channels.
I did reach out to the person who voiced some interest before, but did not get a reply back. So that wasn't successful.
Thank you. So I think we can come back to it at the end, but there is a link on the agenda to, they had a bunch of meetings. I think if you're on the board list, you would have gotten the emails to the trainings. They're all recorded and you can watch them, but there are a series of like 4 different videos that explain what the SEC is, what it does, ways to get engaged, ways to get other people engaged, different kinds of projects and things that different SECs have done across the state, across different districts. So I thought it was a little, sometimes it was repetitive and sometimes it was really helpful. So it's worth checking that out, or if you're talking to someone who doesn't know what the SEC is, that's a great place to send them also. So I just put that link there. And let's go to our guest, Laurie, who's here to talk about CERT.
Okay. First, I'll just very quickly say a little bit about my background. I work at the university. I'm a program manager at the business school. And before that, I was a high school teacher and administrator at a small private school here in Salt Lake. I also have a long background in outdoor education, which included 2 or 3 times certifying as an EMT. So I kind of have a long interest in being prepared for things. And I did the CERT certification with the city, I can't remember exactly when, but within the past couple of years. And they had mentioned during the training, which you all can read about what the purpose of it is here, to give the Salt Lake City communities the ability to better weather the time in between when an event like an earthquake might happen and when they might actually be getting professional help, like firefighters and EMTs and policemen and things like that. So when I did that certification, they had mentioned that part of the bigger plan was that elementary schools were meant to be places where people would gather and get organized and figure out how to help each other. So after the earthquake in, I think in March, I eventually reached out to April, just wanting to know, does Emerson have that function? And it would be great if it did. And I also reached out among my neighbors and just formed a small group of people who are interested. There's about a dozen households on the list, and we really just have some common communication channels. So we're all available to help each other in case of anything, really, shoveling snow or something more serious. So I just think that I'm not a professional. I'm not an EMT anymore, or a firefighter or a policeman, but any organization that is done proactively before there's some kind of a serious incident like an earthquake is really going to go a long way when that happens. So from my standpoint, it would be great if I knew, and maybe wouldn't only be me, there would be a backup person, how to be able to access the school in case that happened. April was generous enough with her time to give me a tour of the building last week. And, I think it would be good if I had a even better sense of just where everything was and how things would be organized and what the emergency supplies are. So that's what I'm requesting. I don't know if this group is, I guess you have an opinion anyway about whether that would be a good idea. So that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Laurie. I'll just add that in the PDF version of the agenda, April provided the school emergency plan, and that was included as an addendum to the agenda. So I can share it if you like, but it does kind of walk through, it's mostly the different phone numbers and all of the different people that get activated when there is an emergency. So if you're on the board and looking at it, you can kind of review that. And then April, I'm not sure how a CERT person might roll into this plan.
In our building, we do have a CERT, a big emergency tub full of supplies and some other first aid kits and 72-hour emergency kits and things like that that are mostly placed in the office, but some are placed in the northeast corner as well. And so we kind of walk through the building, but it would be sort of organizing and letting Laurie know exactly where those things are located. We are an emergency site, I believe, still for the American Red Cross in case there was an evacuation needed in the community. It could happen here at Emerson. In the past, we have hosted some CERT classes here that in the evening that were not super well attended. I know that they've been trying to figure out a way to get more community members involved, and I think they kind of rotate what the location of those trainings, but they have been in this school before, and I think last year was the first year they were not held here. So it's sort of just coordinating all this stuff and letting Laurie know, like, if we can't get her a key to the building, which I think is pretty doubtful that would happen. I'd have to ask Paul Schulte about that, but people she could contact, like she'd have my contact information, Simona, our custodian, just different people who could help her access the building if needed, so that we're all kind of helping each other to coordinate something. Our overflow or emergency evacuation site is over on McClellan. It's one of the churches over there, for example. The in-between, one of their evacuation site or one of their evacuation sites is here on our field or whatever. So it's interesting how different, organizations in the community access each other's, space and so on. So I think it's really letting Laurie know kind of what our emergency plans are, people she can contact, and then maybe us working together to place things in the building so she's aware of where those emergency supplies are. And then trying to figure out a strategy for letting her have access or getting her access to the building in some way. Does that make sense?
And I realized I should have said that in my mind the whole time this has been considering a time like the middle of the night or the weekend when school isn't in session and there's nobody there. Maybe that was obvious, but I was not envisioning or thinking about a school full of children, which is a whole different story. Yeah.
And so I know when, for example, when we had that flood, remember when East High was flooded and Emerson experienced some flooding and et cetera. I'm just using this as an example, but I happened to be not available. I was actually out of the country. And then so there was a list of people that were contacted. So Simona, Brian Conley, so they're on that list. They are all there to come over and open the building or whatever. So I kind of envisioned something like that happening. If there was something that happened like in the middle of the night or whatever, there would be a list of phone numbers for you, Laurie, to contact folks so that we can help you gain access to the building. I think a plan like that might be helpful. Does that make sense?
So how might the SCC assist you with this, April? Is it just like a FYI, this is happening? Is there some kind of
Yeah, sorry. I think it was sort of asking for some input. If anybody else has some ideas, if you think this is a good idea for our school community, just wanted you to be aware and also to just provide any input that you could before we can move forward with some planning. Or if anybody else wanted to be involved, help Laurie with what she's doing in the community, be another idea.
I'm curious if an arrangement like this already exists in other schools and how other schools manage it. Does anybody know? Like maybe Laurie, did they talk about that at the training that you went to? Like suggestions on how this is managed elsewhere?
No, they didn't say anything beyond that this was a function that the elementary schools had. Later, when I reached out to, after the course, when I was thinking about this, I reached out to one of the instructors and I said, I live right down the street from an elementary school. Like, how should I go about getting access to that school or talking to someone? And well, the response was break a window if you need to.
There's got to be a better way.
I mean, I just wonder if there's any kind of like legal liability with, you know, giving somebody, I mean, some kind of access to the school. And I'm not sure that I fully understand in what capacity this person would operate. You know, what decisions might you make? How would you help people or support people? Is the way that you help or support people a potential liability for the school? I mean, you have to think about those things.
Sure.
I'm like vaguely familiar with some of this because I work for Salt Lake County and I work for our aging services. So we talk emergency planning, we do Meals on Wheels, and you know, trying to stay connected to seniors both in our buildings and homebound. And so we've had some discussions about this, and I too have been in trainings where they talk about the schools as neighborhood meeting sites in the event of a widespread emergency. And it was something that I sort of took as a given. And now as I'm part of this conversation, it feels like a gap if the schools are not sort of a better part of that, more meaningful part of that conversation in terms of how that looks. I know it's a model that has been implemented in other communities. I don't know, maybe Tricia, you asked the question about if it's, we have those sort of relationships established with other schools here. Nationally, in some areas, it's a model that they have implemented. I don't know as much about here, and I don't know how. I know when there's like a regional emergency, the incident command, like in reporting structure changes, like it becomes an emergency hierarchy, and different people throughout, at least like our county and other public emergency response teams sort of funnel to this emergency hierarchy that's established. And so I don't know, I'm saying things that I've learned that offer no clarity to the questions that have been asked. So I apologize for that. But I
think that's helpful because it says that there are resources and there are other groups that you know probably have more information that we could learn from.
Samuel, do you have any insight there?
Well, and I wish I remembered this better, but I know that Whittier had this discussion last year a little bit, and I'm not sure where it landed. I think that they, as April just sort of mentioned, that list of people who might have a key, I think they had a similar list that they discussed. I don't remember what they settled on, but it might be worth reaching out to the principal there or the SCC there, because I think they have talked about this. It sounds like a little bit more than maybe you all have.
I'm wondering if there's any direction from the district as well. Like you would think there would be some sort of, given Bianca's comment about liability, particularly with, you know, district buildings and property.
Or even from the state board, maybe.
Or the state board. So it sounds like maybe a little more research is warranted, but.
I can ask Christina Kendall if she can check in about this as well. She's the district's counsel.
And then
I'm sure there are rules. I just don't know what they are.
That'd be helpful.
And Paul Schulte or Ricardo might be another source of information too.
I thought that the city, I mean, we did this, I remember, gosh, 5 or 6 years ago, somebody from the Salt Lake City like Division of Emergency Management came to the school, and he was actually a city employee, and he like gave us the SCC, the training. Do you remember that, April? And my recollection is he was a city employee.
Yeah, that was John, I think was his name. And that's who's provided us a lot of the supplies and things here. There's a huge tub with directions in it, all kinds of stuff about communication, just different binders of things to help kind of guide someone through that. And I haven't
I was under
him for a couple of years, so I don't know if something's changed on that, but yeah, I remember that.
I guess I was just under the impression that it was a Salt Lake City program.
Is the school?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It was
Sorry,
a community, but yeah. Go ahead.
Is the school itself rated as like a bomb shelter or a hazard shelter type zone?
Well, it is through the Red Cross,
Okay.
an evacuation site.
Okay. Because we can maybe implement that as part of kind of as a whole package type of a deal if it's rated for that as well.
Yeah, so I think it's really getting more information from, in my mind, Paul Schulte or Ricardo, who are kind of over this emergency type stuff, and just see how we can collaborate and bring the resources together. So I know Laurie's talking about when kids aren't at school, something happens and this school's sitting here empty with a bunch of emergency supplies and stuff in it. How can we facilitate having access to that to help what's happening in the community? Is that kind of what you're saying, Laurie? So that you have resources that you can use because you've been trained to kind of coordinate an effort like that, and how can the school support what you're trying to do in the area?
Exactly, yeah.
So would it make sense for, well, I guess, let me ask, is there anybody who's interested in helping kind of run that information down? It sounds like there's definitely more coordination needed, and I would hate to just keep adding things to April's plate. So might anyone be interested in volunteering with Laurie to help us run some of this information down?
I don't mind looking into what we're doing at the county. I think the CERT program is maybe like a FEMA initiated model that communities can adopt. Okay, I'm seeing heads nod. So either we've all done some furious Googling or you're familiar with this. And like it's sort of like it's been a long time since I've sort of talked about this, which is a little bit preposterous because we did just have an earthquake in March and we're in the middle of a global pandemic. But here we are. I would be happy to look at what we're doing at the county and funnel some of that information back to this group to see if it's helpful. And if there's an opportunity for intersecting. It does seem like maybe the city is a more practical place, and that would be internet-based research that I'm also happy to do, but I wouldn't have anybody I can call there. Well, I mean, it would start with Google.
I can certainly also, I can do whatever you guys think would be helpful for me to do from your side, but I can certainly go back to the instructors of the course that I took, and it could, detail would be great. You guys have examples of other schools that have been have done this, and ideas for procedures. And
thank you. And then it sounded like maybe Samuel would be willing to check in with the district's council.
Yes, I will do that, and I can also talk to my counterpart at the city to see if he knows anything about this, and that would be Representative Darren Mano. Probably he would know who to call at the city.
Great.
So I'll look into that.
Thanks, everybody.
The city, as Tricia also noticed, oh, go ahead. I was going to say the city of Salt Lake does have a website specifically for CERT training. And it looks like they have a designated CERT coordinator, John Flint. So it's probably the John that April was referring to.
Yeah, that is the person.
Yeah.
So if we're comfortable, should we just revisit this at the next meeting? We'll leave it as another agenda item to figure out how we might best coordinate regarding CERT and our safety plan as a school and sort of what that looks like more broadly.
How often do you all meet?
Monthly.
Okay.
And I can check with Paul and Ricardo also.
I'll do my research and I'll send on what I learned to April.
Great. You can send it to me as well, Laurie. That way I can make sure it gets circulated and added to the agenda and things like that.
Also, hi, Laurie. It's great to see you. We used to be across the street neighbors.
Yes, you do look familiar. Little kids. And a swing on your front porch?
Oh, no swing. That's Allison 2 doors down.
Oh,
We're
okay, okay.
around me.
All right. Well, thank you, Laurie. I appreciate the discussion. I think it's a good one. It certainly makes sense to coordinate school safety with community safety. So it sounds like that's something we can keep moving forward on. And I'll make sure to coordinate with you so you have the links and dates and times and everything for the next meeting as well.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for inviting me, everybody. And enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so
can I ask about that? How did we leave the open seat on the council?
We left it as needing to do some more recruitment, and Tricia made a great suggestion that we push it out on social media.
I mean, I know the school post like that there's an SCC meeting, but I think if you're a new parent or you don't know what it is, it might be helpful to be like, what is the SCC? This is what it is. We really need a person. I don't know.
I'm just wondering if there's anyone on this call right now that would like to.
I did ask that. We didn't get any.
Oh, we didn't get it. Okay, sorry.
Nobody jumped for the phone there.
I wasn't sure if I missed something for the minutes. Okay, thanks.
And when we had the open seats initially, we sent out a school messenger with an information sheet and an interest and all of that before. I guess we could send it out again, but that has gone out to everybody once before.
One of the things I was thinking about is maybe talking with Jared separately, because he did volunteer to help us write some social media content. In the training videos that they provided, or in the training that I attended, they were talking about how using the specific dollar amount that the SCC is in control of in terms of the amount of money that comes from the school land trust to the school is a great way to say, hey, this committee oversees the expenditure of X tens of thousands of dollars at your school. If you're interested, you should pay attention. So there's probably some ideas on those trainings about ways to recruit that are a little more attention grabbing. So I thought I would maybe ask Jared for a little bit of help since he did volunteer for social media stuff. I think we're getting a thumbs up, so that's good.
And if somebody is interested, if we do some recruitment, I say that like I think I might have some pull. Okay. Don't get your hopes up, but they should email you, Ms. Reynolds.
Yeah, that'd be great. Email me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll ask the teachers in the meeting to also maybe tap some of your favorite parents if they're not already tapped.
I had that thought too, that an email from the teacher directly might be a little bit more attention grabbing than the school-wide messages, just because, you don't want to miss what your kid's teacher is saying. And
it's true.
I know when our teacher emailed out about a PTA representative, she had one within like 10 minutes. So.
Is this going to be a first come, first serve? Or if you have multiple folks who are interested, how will you manage? Yeah, because I'm planning to send out messages to both of my kids' WhatsApp groups.
Oh, great.
So
typically,
I'm not.
First serve,
I'm
right?
new here, and I'm not opposed to volunteering or helping. I did reach out to the PTA and didn't hear back from anybody. So if my help is needed here, I'm happy to do so. I just don't know what all is involved. So I can email whomever to get more information. Since I have a kindergartner at the school, I think it's important to be, as he's yelling in the background, more involved than not.
That's great.
We'll just have that whole class represented. I like it.
And maybe Allison could share some information even about what it entails. I know she's been helping us for a while as a voting member and a non-voting member both. She's got a lot of information.
I was just gonna see if you would be open to a motion.
Without sharing any information?
I was gonna move that we appoint Jolie as the remaining member to the SCC.
Are you ready for that?
Because it's November and
sure.
Yeah.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you.
So Jolie,
right.
it really is just that attending this meeting once a month and providing input, especially when we create our land trust plan, which is we have about $74,000 that we create a plan with to help with student achievement. And this committee, that's a big part of their responsibility. And then the other things are kind of like what we talked about tonight, was kind of looking at this CERT thing, or maybe we're talking about the dress code, or so it's just providing input to some of those things. And the purpose of the committee is to just help improve our school, and all, you know, people with different perspectives and kids in different programs really add to that voice. And so we are addressing the needs of all of our kids. So that's kind of what it is.
Okay, that works.
Thanks, Jolie.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Allison,
much
for bringing that up again, and thanks, Jolie, for jumping in. I put some links there again for those videos as well. It is an hour, but I thought it was pretty helpful to get kind of an overview. So, cool. Thank you.
And Jolie, who's your student?
Oliver Breitling. He's kindergarten in Mrs. Jepson's class.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Welcome to Emerson.
Great. Thank you. Our next item is the student success plan. And do you want me to put it on the screen, or can you all see it? There a yes, nod your head if you want it shared.
Oh.
Okay. We're getting enough of those. Sometimes I know we didn't want to look at the agenda for too long. So let me get that up. April, do you want to give a kind of an overview of what the student success plan is for?
So the student success plan is what we used to call the school improvement plan, or the excellence and equity plan. It's gone through a number of names, but basically it's setting goals for the first semester. It used to be that we'd write a plan for the entire year. It's shifted a little bit. Now we write semester goals, and we look at our school-wide, our 3-year priorities, which this council helped us generate, and that's all listed on the plan. So it's, you know, collaboration with families and community, high expectations for all students, responding effectively to individual needs, and providing a safe, healthy environment. And then the process we go through is to kind of consider data. We also want to support our board and what their priorities are. And recently those have been social emotional learning and also literacy have been the priorities set by the school board. When we've gone through and looked at our student data related to literacy, we wrote a school-wide academic achievement goal, and they're SMART goals, so we are very specific about them. But our goal for this semester is to improve reading fluency and comprehension. We're going to have Emerson teachers in grade K through 6 will include identified high leverage lesson components identified by the literacy department in the Wonders program, and use them in their weekly lesson planning for synchronous and asynchronous instruction as part of their Tier 1 instruction. So I know this is a lot of educationese, but we want to be using best strategies for our students in our Tier 1 language arts instruction, whether we're teaching them synchronously, remotely, or asynchronously in their asynchronous day, which is on Wednesday. And the way we're going to measure it is we want 70% of our kids in kindergarten through grade 3 showing typical to above typical growth. From the beginning of the year to the middle of the year, Acadians or DIBELS is what it used to be called, composite scores, and an increase in the number of students in grades 4 through 6 reading at or above grade level by 5% from beginning of year to middle of year on the reading inventory, which is a different measure. So we have access to that data. We look at benchmark scores for our kids, and then those are the things that we'll be implementing. The action steps for it would be training our teachers on priority standards and critical lesson components. And this is through our Wonders program, which is our core language arts program. And teaching them how to plan accordingly. We'll have our language arts coach model high impact or high leverage lesson components in our PLC meetings. And then we'll have intervention groups for kids that need additional support that'll be driven by data. So we'll have some data on kids who need more support and be pulling them in to give them some additional instruction. And a lot of this has to kind of generate or move through our what are called professional learning communities, which meet weekly by grade level. And we look at student data. We talk about kids who need more support, kids who have got it and need some extension, all of those things. So those are instructional meetings that our teachers have with each other. So this is our plan for what we're going to do for our school-wide goal. Does that make sense? This is similar to the goal we had last year, and we did our middle of the year, we got our data for that, and we were right on target. And then we had our dismissal, our closure. So we didn't have any data for the end of the year. So this helps make it a priority for everyone that we're really paying attention to how our students are doing and responding to that data, and also focusing on remote learning right now, because that's how we are teaching. So we want to use those practices that we think will be most beneficial to our kids. And that just involves training teachers and getting some new tools in our teaching toolbox.
Thanks, April.
Mm-hmm. We also are a school that was identified as a targeted student intervention school, a TSI school, for our students with disabilities. We're looking at targeting them to help improve and have them make growth. So we do have another goal, a TSI goal, which is just addressing a subset of our overall school population. And this one talks about to improve academic growth at Emerson. By the end of the first semester, 40% of students with disabilities who are placed in a special class will make typical or better growth as measured by K3 Acadians benchmark. So that's the beginning of the year to the middle of the year composite scores. And our students in grades 4 through 6 will improve at least 100 Lexile points from beginning of year to middle of year, according to the RI proficiency scores. So last year when we collected data on these kids, we had some goals set, and we didn't feel like, we knew that the kids had made growth, but the way the goals were written, they weren't sensitive enough to pick up that progress. Does that make sense? And so we've changed the criteria a little bit. Even for a kid to make 100 Lexile point growth is a lot. That's sort of a yearly goal, but we set a lofty goal there. And we're looking at those teachers getting training that will be progress monitoring our students on their instructional level, which is more sensitive to showing response to intervention or instruction over time. And so we will be using some best practices like, repeated readings, it's words, on a page, just reviewing stuff, doing some vocabulary, instruction with kids, and responding to constructed responses, which is a writing piece. So if we're looking at how we're prioritizing and using time, those are the things that we want to make sure are included in our lessons, so kids are getting those practices or that we know work best for students. So it's trying to work smarter with the time that we have to work with kids.
So April, were we designated or given that designation because we're like a special ed hub, or was that just because there was like our special ed students, their test scores, there was a bigger gap in those, like regardless of the fact that we're a special ed hub? I was just curious like how we got that designation.
So we had that designation at the end of the year before last. So before we became the hub school, we still had special classes in our building. So we already had 3 self-contained classes and our resource students or any other kids. So we did meet that criteria before all the other kids joined us. So it's something that we want to be working on. It wasn't a designation that happened last year, which was the first year that the hub was here. And we did not take end of level tests last year. So it's based on data from the previous year.
And April, I know last year in the SEC, we were talking about the designation, and I know that you had been meeting with the district to talk about additional funding because of that designation, but I don't know if anything came of that.
We didn't really need additional funding. It was just that we needed additional resources. So one of the things that I'd asked for was additional coaching, so that we have coaches that can help our general ed teacher and our special ed teachers who are doing collaborative teaching, for example, to work with our special ed teachers to implement our core programs most effectively. Because what we found last year, right now we have 10 special educators in our school, that they were needing a lot of support, which is great, and our coach was spending a lot of time with them. She also needs to support our general ed teachers as well, and so she was spread pretty thin, and we did request some additional coaching, which they were not able to provide this year. We have a coach in language arts that we see 1 week a month, and the same thing for math. So those are the resources that I was asking for, not money, but just coaching and stuff to help us with our practices. When we created this goal, we worked with Nicole Succi, who is works under Shelley Halverson and has a lot of background in literacy. So she was part of that conversation, and so was our language arts coach. And so as a team, felt like this would, we thought would have a big impact on our kids. So, and help our teachers to be more effective as well. So that's how we created the goal.
Joey, I think I saw your hand up. No? Never mind. Other questions for April?
If you guys have any questions too, I'm willing to ask them. I'm one of the 10 special educators, so And April, like I'm new to Emerson this year and I love working at Emerson because I do have access to those coaches. I'm from a different district and it's been great. So I would definitely say that's a plus to being a part of the team here at Emerson.
Thanks, Diane. And then finally, our last goal is a school-wide goal, and our district has been working on social emotional learning, and that's been a priority set by our school board. We've worked on welcoming practices and routines, etc. We've had some different emphasis each year, and this year we're working on student engagement. And a team from our school attended some Kagan training, and they're coming back and training teachers on some strategies that can be used in their remote classrooms. So each month, teachers are taught a strategy, use it in their instruction, and we're just trying to help build their knowledge and their implementation of some engagement strategies. So this goal is, by the end of the first semester, to create a positive and safe learning community and increase student engagement. Teachers at Emerson will implement at least 3 Kagan structures during classroom instruction. And so the first one we've done is round robin, and then this next month we will be working on the second one. I don't know which one it is yet, the team knows, but and then we kind of watch for it when we're observing or see if teachers are using it, and we're just trying to help our kids be more engaged during their instruction. And those are the goals we set, and this is the draft plan that was submitted for our board to review. And there's a lot of other details in here that you didn't really want to know about, but that's the gist of it.
So then when do you measure this? Like, is it the end of the year or like in the middle of the year?
So it'll be the middle of the year, and then we'll rewrite goals for the second semester.
Okay.
Which is great because I think that was part of some of the discussion in the district meeting, right, was looking at the DIBELS or Acadians testing coming into the school year and looking at some of the gaps that were there.
You're talking about in the board meeting on the 3rd?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I know part of, I think, I don't know, there were some slides with some charts showing the K through 3rd.
Well, what it showed was across the district, and it wasn't measuring any of the remote learning that's gone on since the beginning of the fall, but it was measuring. So I think it's from the middle of the year last year to the beginning of this year, because there was no end of year data from last year. And what it showed was that, for 2nd and 3rd grade, we were sort of right on trend for where we've been headed for the last 4 or 5 years. But the 1st grade and kindergarten students may have taken a little bit more of a dip during the disorganized spring online learning experience. So that's good information for us to have. It doesn't mean that what we're doing now isn't working. It just means that we need to be especially careful that we attend to those, those early reading needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when we've looked at our data, our initial data, I was concerned when I saw it. We felt like some of it had to do with, we were one of the schools that was set up to have the Acadians assessment happen right at the beginning of the school year. And we chose to do it ourselves, kind of get data and move on. So when kids came in to pick up their device to meet their teacher and do all that stuff, we did their Acadians training with a stranger they had never met. They hadn't been in a school for however many months. They had to take a math assessment too. And so I think that wasn't the best testing condition for kids. They weren't as comfortable. And there was probably some regression there too from spring. And so as we've been collecting formative data, I think teachers are noticing that those numbers of kids are starting to kind of progress and that they're kind of spreading out. So we know who our lower group kids who need more support are, because they've kind of remained where they are, but our other kids are making progress and moving forward. So we're keeping a close eye on that because we want to make sure we're addressing that. But so the test data was, you know, it's something to consider for sure, just like Sam said. And then we're trying to keep an eye out on our kids and see how they're moving forward. But the kindergartners moving into first grade had the biggest dip, for sure, like Sam said.
So do you know when the next Acadians testing, that mid-year testing timeframe is? Because I would love to see, I'll be really interested to see that, what that comparison looks like.
Yeah.
It takes place in January, right?
January, yeah.
December 14th is when ours is scheduled.
The 10th through the 14th?
So December 14th. And so we'll have teachers probably test a lot of their kids again. There is a testing team from the district, but we couldn't figure out a way to make that work with kids being on remote learning. So our teachers have done a lot of that assessment. But we're scheduled for December 14th for our middle of year.
And I think the board will look at the district-wide data probably in February or March, because it takes some time to kind of collate it all and organize it.
Is it possible that that the SEC can look at our school data before then, like in January, April? Is that something we could put on the agenda for the January meeting?
Yeah. And it's different too, because we're right at the beginning of the window. So there'll be like Emerson, and then all the other schools will be kind of in this window. So they probably won't be done until the end of January with all of the schools, but we'll have our data available in January to look.
April, just out of curiosity, why was there a reason why we did it so much earlier than a lot of other schools? Was there a purpose or a reason behind that?
It's kind of random. In fact, we're usually one of the later schools, which is also, there has some disadvantages to that too. For example, teachers don't get their end of year data until like the end of May. So it just kind of rotates. And so that's why we're on kind of a rotating schedule. This is the first time we've been early, actually. Hannah can speak to that. I mean, we're always like, we want it earlier. And then this year, you know, we are earlier. We wish we wouldn't have been. So, but it's just kind of a rotating schedule. The assessment department sets it up.
Gotcha. Thank you.
April, Bianca just let us know that only the first page of the agenda made it on the website instead of all of the attachments. So I'm going to drop the plan as a link in the chat.
So I only posted the agenda on the website, not all of the.
Not the attachments. Okay. So I will drop that. It's the draft plan, and so that's why it's not publicly available yet, because it's still in review at the district. Is that correct?
It's a draft, but you should have gotten a PDF of it.
I did. I'm going to put it here in the chat. There it is. So hopefully you can see it that way. Great. Other questions for April about the student success plan? Comments?
So I'm trying to understand. There was a board last year, presumably, that created this draft plan, and this plan is under review. So you have these objectives and you've made these investments. And so the next step would be that the plan is approved and then we start measuring against these objectives. Is that about right?
Yeah, we are, my supervisor has reviewed it and we've gotten the initial kind of go ahead. The board will have to approve it, but we have been operating under this plan for the last, month or 6 weeks. So we started a little later this year than we usually do, but yeah. So it's kind of been approved by Brian Conley and that team, but eventually these all go to the board, but yes.
Okay, and so then would you say that the responsibilities of this group are completed in those actions, or because it seems to me like the plan really relies heavily on training teachers and then having some expectation of the teachers to deliver. Is there something more that we do to, support
No,
those goals?
it was just to provide you with that information, just as a, just kind of what we're working on as a school. When we get into the land trust plan, that's where this committee has a lot of say, and we kind of collaborate to create that plan. So the student success plan is just for your information so that you know what our priorities are for the year.
But I would say that the actions that you take in the student success plan align really closely with the way that we utilize the land trust funds, right? If you look at like the interventionist and those that supports role, those are targeted to the same academic goals. So the student success plan sort of falls out from the goals that are set in that way. And then I would also add, Bianca, I heard you ask, but I'm not sure if April answered. The SCC does not write the student success plan. That is, April writes the plan. Is that correct, April?
Oh, I meant so there was a plan, and then I saw that there was a line of like expenditures. So I guess I thought I was assuming that those expenditures were coming from this group in alignment with that plan. Is that not correct?
It's the funding that supports it is from our TSSA funds or from my discretionary funds, our 1033, to get personnel to support the plan. So does that make sense?
Does that represent all the TSSA funds, or is that just a portion? Well, we have some kinder paras that are paid out of it. So some other things to support kind of small group instruction in that, but the TSSA money is, the other funds are to support this plan in particular, but also just small group instruction and kid instruction in general.
Thanks, April. Any other questions on this?
I'm new, but I do have a comment about that. So it's my first year being at Emerson, and and we loved that program. Like the one-on-one teacher, the one-on-one sit down, the evaluation, this distinct goals with the parent, with my daughter. And our teacher, Ms. Jepson, has already followed up on it. So I just want to say, I feel like that is actually very successful and helping our online learning at our family.
And was that the SEP conference or the beginning of the year conference?
The beginning of the year conference, but I will tell you, our teacher has checked in over 2 to 3 different times regarding those goals that we set already.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that.
That's great to hear. Okay, I was hoping we'd have a little bit more time today, but we had a pretty packed agenda. So I'm going to ask Samuel to maybe give us I think a lot of us, it looks like from all the nodding heads, watched at least part of the last board meeting on November 3rd. But I would like, if Samuel, if you have any comments that you want to make to the SEC, otherwise we probably can just kind of talk through anybody's questions that they might have for you about the meeting and the potential plan to return in person.
So, and this might be duplicative. I apologize if it is. What we heard was a sort of a sketch of a plan from the superintendent for bringing back pre-K through first grade, and then staggered after that second, third, or actually I think he said pre-K through second grade, third and fourth, and then fifth and sixth. That, where we draw those lines may shift a little bit, and I think we asked for more information, but I think it's fair to say that there's an appetite to keep that conversation going. I have mostly been getting messages from parents that say, let's stick with what we have while we're in this tremendous spike. But I think that, the superintendent is, I think, doing the right thing by presenting to us the information he's getting from the county, which does suggest that we are keeping our older kids safer, but that we may, for kids, the risk of getting coronavirus may be about the same, whether they're in online learning or in school. And that's not, that's data that's pretty new and maybe not fully vetted, but that's what he's hearing at his weekly meetings with the county health director. We don't have to make a decision based on that, but I think it's good information for us to have, and I think it's good for him to be thinking about ways we can get kids back in the classroom, and good for us to be thinking about when we really want to do that and what our parameters as a community around that discussion are. So, I don't know what will happen. I mean, we could take a decision on the 17th or December 1st. Those are the two remaining meetings we have scheduled this year. Or we could just sort of stay where we are. Open enrollment for the middle of the year begins, I think, December 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. So that's kind of, I think, a date that a lot of my colleagues are looking at. If we didn't make a decision on the 17th, it would be, I think it would be hard to decide to bring kids back in January. The next quarter mark would be sometime in late March. So I'm happy to talk about that and hear what your input is. I've heard from many of you via email. So and I know I've responded to some of you and not to others. So I apologize. It's just taking me a long time to get through my backlog of emails, but be happy to try to answer any questions or take any comments from you about it.
So I do have a small question on it. Is with the governor's kind of announcement of kind of showing a sense of more urgency, have you heard anything on your side of things on if there was more of a leaning towards the continuing the virtual learning, or still planning on going more towards kind of that hybrid system?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the legislative leadership and the governor's office have mostly been very pro in-person learning and very pro local control, right? Which is what has resulted in us unquestionably being out of step with the districts around us. But I think we represented what we were hearing from our constituencies, which was mostly, be careful and be cautious and let's do one thing and do it well. And that's sort of the decision that we made in the fall. We did have, and I know many of you saw this, we did have a visit from Senator Todd Weiler at our meeting. He came and gave public comment and wanted us to know that legislative leadership, the Speaker of the House and the Senate President had a meeting with Dr. Deborah Birx and Dr. Robert Redfield from the CDC, where they talked about prioritizing kids being back in school during the rest of this year. I don't know if they talked about us as a district specifically or not, but I think that I think that there are eyes on us that are wondering why we're not in step with the rest of the state. And I have not heard personally from any of those legislative leaders or anyone from the governor's office, but to people that ask me that question, I just say, well, I think we have done our best to come up with a plan that represents what our community wants. And that's easy for me to say because I do hear from people that are upset and want more options, but I mostly hear from people that are very happy that we made a more conservative choice in relationship to the virus. So I don't think it's a bad idea for people that feel strongly about this issue to talk to their legislators and talk to other elected officials. But I don't have any idea when, if at all, there will be a conversation between us as a school board and any of those folks. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Got a question. I wasn't able to view the entirety of the board meeting, but when the superintendent presented kind of the staggered reopening plan by grade level, I mean, my understanding is this is what it may look like rather than this is what we will do and this is when we will do it. Was there any talk of tying that to metrics related to kind of community transmission levels, positive test rates? Because I know kind of the current standing plan that was voted on the board by the board had those sort of, public health metrics triggers, so to speak.
So, and just to review, I think you probably all know this, but I'll just say it again. Our current metrics are 5% and a rolling average of 10 per 100,000 daily cases to bring us back on some kind of hybrid model. So we did talk about that in the meeting. And a few board members mentioned that we had heard from our constituents that they wanted a data-based metric rather than a date that was sort of an arbitrary goal. I think that, and I understand that because I certainly want to make decisions based on science and not public opinion. But the problem I think we're running into is that this new information we have about the relative difference in how safe it might be for kids, little kids especially, is not pointing towards a metric. So we could arbitrarily choose like a higher number, 10% and 20 cases and wait for that, but that would not really be based on data. It would just be us choosing a metric in relationship to our other metric. So I think, these are hard questions because we absolutely want to be doing our best job to serve kids and give them a good educational experience and make sure they learn to read, especially in those first few years of their schooling. But I think there are reasons to be really worried about the adults in the building and, worried about, there was another school district in Southern Utah that had this terrible experience where they were forced to kind of close down, not because of kids getting sick, but because they couldn't keep their building staffed. And I don't know that would happen to us across the board. I mean, it's a pretty different situation, but I think it certainly could happen at schools or, even across the whole district. So go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yeah, it kind of related to what you're saying. I've read that there are some teachers that are planning to take some action this week because I guess these are teachers who are in the classroom and don't feel like sufficient protections have been provided. Do you know anything about that and have a sense as to, I know that we're out of step with what the other school districts are doing, but are those other school districts and the teachers especially, is the sentiment generally positive?
I have heard, I have not heard about a demonstration or a strike or anything like that. I used to teach dance for Tanner Dance in some schools in the Granite District, so I've talked to many of those educators and some high school educators that teach, I mean, not especially dance teachers, but some other educators as well. I would say most of them are pretty stressed out. And I don't, I mean, our teachers are working really hard and working in ways they've never worked before too. But what I've heard a lot is that it's really hard to teach to two different groups at once, which is what other districts are sometimes doing is, so you have your Zoom audience and your in-person audience and you're wearing a mask because you're in person. But I've also heard from a couple of teachers who are parents who, are working in Granite and wondering why we're out of step with Granite. So there is a diversity of opinions about this, even among employees of school districts. Does that answer your question? I don't know the specifics of this
Yeah,
action that you're
I just
talking about.
posted a link
Okay.
to an article about it, but I don't know where these teachers are, or how they represent the
Yeah.
broader group.
The UEA, which is the state union for teachers, did make a request to the governor to consider going to online learning for grades 7 through 12, basically between Thanksgiving and the end of the year. I doubt that will go anywhere, but I think that's based, again, on some of this information we're seeing that, high school is really where we're seeing transmission at schools, at least here in Utah.
This is kind of a related question. So you had mentioned that the superintendent had been provided information relating to risk to younger students, younger learners, and younger grades. Did that data also consider, though, again, the transmission among teachers of those younger grades, right, or staff in the school? I mean, are they only looking at the data relative to the safety of in-person learning for younger students, but ignoring that of educators and administrators and staff? Or do you know if that data is kind of coextensive in considering both?
That's a great question. So he goes to these weekly meetings with the 5 superintendents of the county and the 5 board presidents. So our board president is Melissa Ford, who represents Precinct 6. So you could probably call her and ask her what she's heard in those meetings. I will reveal a little somewhat insider information, which is that I think we're planning to have some small group meetings. We can't meet as a board, we're bound by public meeting laws, so we can't meet without noticing it unless we meet in groups that are smaller than the number of people that would be required to make a decision by vote. So we can meet in groups of 3, if we want to meet with the superintendent or other district office officials. So I think we're going to have some more information this week given to us in advance of the meeting on the 17th. And I will certainly ask that question because it's a question that is at the top of my mind and at the top of the kind of agenda for figuring out how, if at all, we can do this in the near future. My sense, though, is that, this data is really only coming into focus at all because we've now had a few months where you have this natural experiment of, 1 district that's in remote learning and 4 that are not. It's, I'm sure you may have heard Dr. Hirsch in our previous study sessions say that he's not seeing in his HERO project research evidence that there's a lot of transition going on in classrooms. But, again, even he said the lack of evidence is not evidence that we know it's not happening. It just means we haven't gathered evidence that it's happening. So I don't know. And a lot of people email me and tell me stories that seem to be pretty strong anecdotal evidence that it's happened to them, both, all over the county. I've heard from people that have told me stories where they feel like they know that they've gotten it from a classroom interaction. So it's certainly possible, and it's certainly very concerning.
I have a question for April. I feel like this is a very emotional and a very political and a very complex topic that we're discussing, right? April, I'm curious as to how our teachers at Emerson are feeling. I think it was Samuel that brought up, like, there was a, walkout and Bianca's brought up an article that possibly there are people doing sick leave on Thursday. So it definitely, you have a lot of people feeling both ways. Could you speak to how the teachers at Emerson feel about this? Is a majority, or are you feeling a sense?
I would say that most are really concerned about coming back because of particularly the surge that's been happening. I think if we had this conversation 6 weeks ago, they might have felt more comfortable, but with things spiking and, you know, it's concerning. We have some teachers that are, you know, vulnerable or live with a vulnerable person. And so it's terrifying to them to come back and potentially put, you know, their family members or themselves at risk. I do have a handful of teachers who feel strongly about being back with kids because they feel like they can provide better instruction, but it's that worry about, you know, the safety aspect of it.
So it's all over the board at the teacher level too. Okay.
And so the thing that they're worried about too, and what's happened, and this is anecdotally, the teachers who've been sick or whatever and needed to be out for 2 weeks or whatnot, at least they were able to work from home and provide quality instruction to their students. And their worry is if the kids are back in the school and they have to be at home, students are going to have subs if we can find subs. And they're not going to have that same quality of instruction. And so I think that's also a worry for folks.
All those are really good points.
So it's when the adults go down, the whole infrastructure falls apart. And then that's what impacts students. So I think they're less worried about students. I mean, there are some that are very worried about student transmission or whatever, but more so like this whole thing, it can just crumble and then our kids are not going to get the quality instruction that they would. At least now when we're online, they can take care of their students. But I don't know if the other teachers want to respond to that question or not.
But I really love that insight information from being in the building with the teachers. So thank you, because it does give you a different kind of scope than us sitting out here talking about kids transmissions and our worries about, you know, us working and trying to do the kids saying we've got our own, but it is different with you being in there with the teachers. So I appreciate those thoughts.
Do any of the teachers want to comment on that?
I just want to talk about the COVID site, and I don't have it on this computer because this is the district computer, and if I put too much on it, it goes crazy on me since we do Zoom on this one. But I could have sworn I opened it up last week, and there are 180 teachers in the state of Utah that had gotten COVID. And I might be misspeaking, but there is that website. There's a website to look at, and I don't know. I don't have it on my computer, but I think the biggest thing that I worry about is consistency. And I know it's hard on parents, it's hard on teachers, but I have 100% of my kids showing up. And if they don't show up, I harass my parents until they get on because I just dojo them. Zoom, get on Zoom. And I think that we all can be a little bit more creative about how we get our kids on as parents and as teachers. And I just think it's, you know, we've got, if we're in this until the Christmas or holiday break, I mean, that's a lot of instructional time. So I just think anything we can do as a group too is how can we ensure that the message is sent out to parents that yes, we are doing something that's of value. Is it always perfect? No. Do we get kicked off on Zoom sometimes? Yes. Does technology become our enemy? Absolutely. But we are working our tails off and we're doing the best we can. So I just think getting parents to understand that we are in it to win it. We are not in it to harass your kid or make your kid depressed. It's about teaching them and getting them roaring. So, I mean, I think there's creative ways to do it. And I feel like April's leading us in a good direction when we do our PLCs about how can we get our kids more engaged. And I think that's the important piece.
And Mary, I think you just said it. I think it feels like everyone's in it to win it. I love the way you said that because I was very hesitant for online kindergarten. I mean, as we've been talking this whole time, it's that age group that's really challenging on Zoom when they can't read the words. But these teachers have stepped up to the plate to the next level of how they are encouraging them to get on, how they are helping them. I mean, I see, you know, parents working in the corner and these teachers are being so creative the way they're maneuvering them through their work. So the effort is not going unnoticed. That's all I wanted to make sure the teachers on here knew.
Yeah, and I think the more we do it, the more we share with each other, the better it's going to be. So.
Yay. I thank you, Mary Lou. I just want to ask, I can't see your name all of a sudden. Deanne, I can't remember.
Yeah, Diane.
Sorry. Before Diane speak, because I really want to hear your thoughts, I just want to ask you to consider, Samuel, April, teachers, parents, what we might do as the SCC to assist with Samuel or April in representing what our school community feels, wants, needs. I don't know. The district did their survey at the beginning of October. We have not done like a school community survey to my knowledge. I don't know if that's something that we want to consider, but I wanted to throw that out there while we hear back from Diane, and then Ms. Feinerbrock if she'd like to comment as well. Go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, I've been one of the lucky few who gets to have students online and in person because I teach students who receive special education services. And I would just say it's been really great having kids back in person and still getting to see them online. And I have 100% participation too. Just definitely when we go forward, I would say it's really hard to do both. I luckily have 2 paras in my classroom and they're helping with the in-person students. So I have about 4. And then I have the other like 5 to 6 online or back and forth. And so definitely just like, it's so cool to see what everyone is doing and just moving forward. And like, I love how planned we've been this year and just keeping that going and just having, like, as a teacher, one of the like most important things to me, and April and me had a meeting about it today, is just having that planning time as a teacher, especially when we're making changes and having those transitions, because I have some students with like autism and ADHD, and when we're making transitions to maybe more services or more time or things like that, just having that planning time and being able to create structures and routines is really what I find is I'm able to keep my students focused on education. So I guess that's my kind of feedback to give.
Thanks, Diane.
Sorry. I don't feel like I have anything overly profound to add to this. It's a very challenging question, and I think we all go back and forth about it. I think in speaking to my colleagues, we would want the parents to know how grateful we are for their support, and we know how hard you are working as well. And we're working, like Mary Lou said, as hard as we can. And I appreciate Samuel and the board taking into consideration. Obviously, I want to teach my class and I want to do what's best for the children, but I don't necessarily want to do that at a risk to my own elderly parents' health or things like that. So I just appreciate, everyone kind of trying to see the other perspective. I, of course, don't know what the answer is, but I think there are a lot of, I think teachers were nervous in some ways, as anybody would be, I think. And the one thing that I will say is I agree with what Mary Lou and Diane have said, is just that the nice thing about this is we are consistent, and every day, we're on Zoom and the kids know what to expect. And when I read about schools opening and then closing for 2 weeks and then opening and closing for 2 weeks, that sounds awful for teachers, for parents, for students. So it's, another situation to consider, but thank you.
Yeah. I was just going to say that I was on the Clayton Middle School SCC call this morning at 7:30 a.m. and they got the district survey extracted for just Clayton parents. So that was kind of interesting. I don't know if we can do that for Emerson. I don't know if the sample size is big enough, but just to throw that out there, they presented that this morning. And then, so my question was, I guess for Sam and April, like, have you been given any indication? I mean, there's been media reports about like enrollment dropping in Salt Lake District, but also obviously across the entire state. And I'm just curious if you've heard anything about how they're going to handle that, and if they're going to like do some kind of hold harmless thing, because clearly like enrollment and change in enrollment affects, next year's funding. I'm just curious if you've heard anything about how they're planning to handle that.
Well, so my understanding is that the funding is on a 3-year average, right? And so this year is going to hurt us, but I don't know. I mean, it would be great if the legislature decided to kind of hold everybody harmless because every district across the state has lost students. 20 states across the country have lost students. And it's not, I mean, it would be disingenuous for me to say that we had not lost students because we didn't do in-person learning, because clearly we have. But I don't think that that explains all of the loss in our district. And I think that there, like you were saying, I just think this is kind of a terrible year. And I would hope the legislature would think about making an exception to the policy. I'm not going to hold my breath for that, but I do think, and maybe you have more to add to this, April, but there's a kind of a natural flow where, as people retire, you can replace them with new teachers more or less depending on the need. So I'm not sure that I think there is reason for the board and the superintendent, the business administrator to be worried about it, but I don't know that it's like a exigent terror about, I think everybody will have their jobs next year. I wouldn't be worried about that. I think it's sort of, we need to start thinking about, how we plan for the next 2 or 3 years. Is that a fair thing to say, April? I mean, I've been on the board for 1.5 years, so these are not discussions I'm super familiar with, but I'm sort of familiar with the process.
Yeah, and I think that some schools have been hit harder than others. And just, we're not that far off in terms of enrollment from where we were last year, although we are off from what we were projected to be by about 70 kids, but not from where we were last year with kids who actually were attending Emerson. So at this point, we're a little worried. However, it's like we just have to dig in and live in the moment. It's like, this is what we have to do right now and see how it turns out. I have heard that, there's just sort of holding us fairly harmless. Like, we're not going to just get hammered because we believe those kids are going to come back. And I think the state would know that once we go to in-person, we're going to get some kids back and so on. So when the kids show up, you can't, you have to kind of have FTE to serve students. So I don't know how that will shake out, but I think that 3-year average piece helps us in that regard.
Well, and that may be something that we need to watch the legislative session for and kind of see what bills start to come. I think that's probably a place to encourage families to talk to their legislators, write to their legislators, or even as the SCC to write, or as the school board to write. So I think that's maybe something we can look at, but it's something for me to track, because I can't believe they wouldn't hold everyone harmless, but.
It's kind of a related question, but kind of the opposite side of the coin. I know that other school districts have also seen losses of students that are in person, either through transitioning to online learning or online charters, that sort of thing. I'm wondering whether there's information relating to like teacher retention in Salt Lake District relative to other districts, and whether Salt Lake's, kind of unique in-person learning situation, either caused a net loss or a net, kind of, yeah.
I haven't seen any numbers, but I have heard a lot of anecdotal data that would indicate that, we got a lot of, I've heard from principals that we got a lot of great teachers that came to us from other districts that, were attracted to our online model, and I know that other districts have lost dozens of teachers based on what they've chosen to do. So I don't have a data answer to that, but I think that our choices have allowed us to keep people and gain new people that are really strong. So that's definitely a positive thing.
I think part of the problem is that data those data don't exist because we don't consistently track the reason why teachers leave across districts. It's all over the board. Some do exit surveys, but there's no, I mean, you can literally, like, across the state, you can see this teacher went here, but you have no idea why.
Just
Can you see?
Oh, you go first.
So to that data question, can you at least see the rates and how that changes?
Well, the State Board of Education can run those queries. Do they and put them out? No. But the data exists in the Cactus database.
It would be interesting to see if Salt Lake experienced fewer early retirements, for example, than other districts on a per teacher basis.
Yeah,
I'm sure we did.
But I think you'd never be able to put any causality behind it.
And just jumping in anecdotally as a teacher in the district, I think we saw both, right? Like in the spring when we were remote, we had some teachers, they were like, I'm out. I don't want to do remote learning. This is not what I signed up for. So we did have, I think, some that were maybe considering retiring that maybe jumped on it a little bit sooner. But then I really think that once we said we were going remote in the fall, we had teachers stay in a way that other districts were having people exit because of that safety factor. So I think it was both ways. I have a question, maybe a little plea for something that's within Emerson's control with this situation. So as a teacher and having a unique position, being in the district office, but then also being a parent of an Emerson student, I mean, I agree 100%, like our teachers are killing themselves to make remote learning work and doing things and stretching themselves in a way that is so inspiring to watch what my colleagues are doing out there. And I applaud every single teacher that's doing this, because this is 100% harder than teaching in person, I think, from my position. So I love that the board is sticking to the science. I love that Larry is in a position of constant Superintendent Madden of like changing his perspective with the science, right? Not just like sticking to one thing, but we're moving with it. And I really admire that. I do though also know, and I don't know other parents on this, if people are experiencing the emotional toll the remote learning is doing to our students in a way that, you know, none of us maybe were expecting. I think sitting 5-6 hours in front of a computer is doing something really interesting to our kids. I have a teacher who's an amazing teacher who said to me one day in a meeting, she said, do you ever wonder if you're real? She's like, I stare at myself on Zoom all day and I start to wonder if I'm real. I have to go stand in the sunshine and pinch myself. And I just think, okay, we're adults feeling that. What is this doing to the psyche of kids, right? So I'm just wondering if we're like problem solving this, if there is a way we could bring in kids safely, right? Like safety has to be our number one concern, but how do we safely bring kids into small groups? How do we safely create social experiences, right? Can they see their teachers from a distance in like a remote parade? Or could they, I don't know, I just wonder like how could we bring back those human components that remote learning has lost? Because I 100% agree. We need to stay safe first and foremost, our teachers, our kids, our families. But this emotional piece is big too. So anyway, that's just my plea and wondering if, April, I don't know if your teachers have thought about that. I know that in some of the other sites, they've done like reverse parades, or they've, you know, had like half the kids in the class come in one day for some kind of social something. Again, safety being the number one. I don't know, have you guys talked about that at all, April?
We have talked about it, in different grade levels are approaching it differently. So we can bring kids in. A lot of times we find that parents aren't able to bring their kids in. They're in a daycare or whatever. So that's been one obstacle. As we've looked at other schools doing, you know, parades and so on, we are a school that has kids from all over our district attending it. We have kids in our magnet program that are from every corner of the district. Our hub students are spread across the entire east side of the district. And we have a lot of kids who are out of boundary. We could do a parade here if people could come, but it's different than like a neighborhood school that everyone lives in the school boundary. So we could look at doing that. It's been, I know there have been teachers who have approached parents about bringing their kids in, and they've just said, I can't do it because I work and my child's in daycare or whatnot. And so then it's sort of COVID. But as we've gotten more flexibility in grade levels, we're talking about that again. At first it was kind of the K2 kids could come in, and now it's been expanded. And so we're targeting some kids who we think aren't doing well. And then we can look at some other things too. So it's kind of teacher or grade level by grade level is how we're approaching it. And the reason for the school-wide stuff is because of the uniqueness of our school, our student population. So, but that is good input. Thank you.
Well, again, that makes total sense. And I don't know that parades are necessarily the answer, you know, again, but again, there's just these emotional layers that, I mean, I'm assuming that's not just in my household. Most parents I speak to, I think I've heard of like one tell me, oh, it's going great. And I'm like, really? Because it's not going great for the majority of households I talk to.
Well, it's interesting too, because we did have another layer of social emotional support that was provided by, you know, Mindy and Shelley district with the U of U, you know, the Ascend program. And we had slots that we could, you know, refer students to get more support, and also with our 2 school social workers that work here. And we have not been able to get parents to respond to phone calls, emails, anything. In fact, our social workers, I think they only have like 2 students that they're seeing. So it's like, wow, what's going on? And so we've talked about, you know, bringing kids in, doing it, you know, telehealth kind of stuff, you know, via Zoom or whatnot. And we have not been able to get those students to engage in those programs, which we're kind of pondering right now what we can do about that. But we referred quite a large number of students and just have not had good response, which to me is surprising. I was super excited about it. I thought this is awesome. We can do stuff, and we haven't had a good response. And there's going to be some tier 1 and 2 kind of stuff posted, like a parent group, a social kind of a group for kids, that there'll be a link on the website through Ascend where kids can kind of meet and socialize together. And we're hoping that we'll get more of a response there. But the tier 3 stuff, the individual work, was not, we're struggling with that right now. So just so you know, some things are coming, some opportunities.
That's good. And I don't mean to filibuster this at all. I just think, you know, there's the majority of parents too that I'm talking to are parents where their kids keep it together on Zoom, right? Like their kid can maintain it when they're in front of the computer. It's the behind the scenes things that maybe wouldn't get the referral, right? Because the teachers aren't seeing it in those settings. It's the not the loud impact, right? It's the behind the doors impact that we're seeing. So
yeah, one more thing about that. So there will be, and we had the Ascend people I think here last time, there will be a survey that goes out, and it's really geared toward identifying those internalizing kids that are having some needs and need some support. So when you get that link, they will be identifying students through that data and reaching out also. So we're trying to target those students as well and provide support. So, or if you would want to reach out to Zoe, our counselor, we can start designing some stuff. Certainly we want parents to just contact the school if their kids need something more, so we can address.
Thank you, April. I appreciate
Mindy, can I tell you something that my class did last year? That we were on Zoom all the time, and we did it all day long, and they just kept on coming in. So I do small groups, but the kids, I mean, they had teams, so like they were chit-chatting. I had to stop them from chatting on Teams when we were teaching. But the kids now in Canvas have figured out how to send messages to each other. So now they're doing messages during class, and I'm like, and I don't have access to it unless I'm on Zoom, so I'm not checking the Canvas page. So I mean, they're dying for a conversation. But last year I had my whole group, they just got into Prodigy, and we can't use Prodigy this year. That's not a district supported. But you can get it as a parent, and they would do like Prodigy birthday parties, and then Zoom breakout rooms of doing like win, lose, or draw. I mean, parents can be really creative that way, and maybe that's something we should provide as a group of teachers of what are some fun things. Yes, it's still on the computer, but even if you throw them into breakout rooms, like I don't start teaching until 8:15 because I've got a couple of kids that are in transport. So now the way I get them on so that they're on time and we can really get started at 8:15 is they just come in. I'm like, okay, throw you into a breakout room, and they're just chit chatting with each other. Am I controlling what they're talking about? No. Could I, I mean, I have a really good group of kids, so I'm not too worried about it. But I mean, just letting them do that kind of stuff. So I think maybe that's something that would be worth our time to look at, because I don't think putting anybody in anywhere right now is a safe choice. And that's, maybe I'm just really an old lady that is scared to go back to school. But
Well,
the reality is our numbers are so high, you don't want them to have too much contact with their buddies right now.
right. Well, to that point, I've heard from some teachers who have kind of implemented the breakout room with, very small groups to kind of, where it's a little more kind of free interaction with the other kids. And we've seen that in my son's class. And that's been effective. I do know some teachers have considered kind of small group in-person learning at a distance, but one of the concerns that they've had has been kind of equity related concerns, where it's been difficult for parents that are both working to, run their kid to a small group session, for 30 minutes in the middle of the work day, right? And then bring them back. And so that, I think, is why they've kind of, at least the teachers that I've spoken with have moved towards kind of online small group, just because it's kind of easier to accommodate with the rest of the day.
So I want to be mindful of time, but Bianca's been waiting a long time. So I'm just going to point out that it's 7:30, and then Bianca will go. And if there's any last comments or questions for Sam, we'll take those. If you have thoughts or ideas about how we as an SCC might assist the Emerson community in supporting our representatives at the district level, that would be great. So Bianca, go ahead, and then Jared will come to you.
Yeah, so this is, I think, a question and a comment for Sam. I watched the replay on YouTube of the board meeting, and I was surprised that the options that were being presented were really just kind of two slightly different versions of the same thing, and they were really targeted at getting kids back into the classroom. I was surprised that there weren't any other alternatives presented, anything that was innovative. It seemed like, and I think Jack, you brought this point up earlier, it was really one-sided, looking at, this is what the kids need, this is what the younger kids need, and this is what the data says about, that the kids are going to be just fine. And it didn't take into consideration any of the other major stakeholder groups. And, this obviously became a tense point, because I think there was another member of the board who was trying to speak on behalf of parents who are also, a big stakeholder group. But it seems like the two options were really lacking in terms of innovation and considering the needs of all of the different stakeholders. And I don't know what you do about that, because surely there are other school districts, not just in Utah, but all over the United States, who are doing very different things. So, I guess what happens in terms of how do you get more options on the table?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. And I agree. I think what was presented was both kind of sketchy in that there wasn't a ton of detail, and it was, the extended classroom, which is what we've talked about, teachers teaching to two groups at once, not an innovative model. We see it all over the place. Or just, figuring out how we can keep people in separate cohorts, which is maybe better. I mean, that's sort of what I've heard, is that teachers would prefer that. But I think there is a lot of space for more innovation. And, one of the reasons that I really like our superintendent, Larry Madden, is that I've seen the way he works with, because he was the principal at SLCC before we asked him to step into this unenviable role. And like many of the sort of more innovative educators that we have in our district, he does a lot of teaming, where he'll, have a group of educators that kind of deal with a cluster of students and are kind of have each other's backs, so that they can look out for all the students in their pod. That's something that, like, I'm more familiar with that happening at at the secondary level, but I think from conversations I've had with him, I would think that he would maybe look for an approach like that for little kids, so that it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be just one teacher struggling to deal with these two groups and struggling to do it all by themselves, but that there might be a way to kind of, like, if you had two cohorts, have one teacher that rotated into the online cohort, and then one, I think there are other ways to do it. And I think we have lots of creative minds that he has access to and the board has access to. So that, that work is going on, and I hope that we have more to report on publicly in that way on next Tuesday. But I think part of the problem is also just that we're, as a board and as a community, we're reliving this decision that we made in the summer, and we've kind of been in this tense state. I mean, it's sort of what Mindy was saying about kids. We're sort of going through the same thing as adults, where we just keep reliving this decision over and over and over again. And I can't help but wonder, putting the safety discussion aside just for a moment, if we wouldn't be better off picking a date that's a little further in the future, because that would give us more time to discuss and plan, and no one would feel like it was this horrible surprise. And we might be able to kind of have a better public discourse around what is the model, what does it really look like. I don't know. There are no easy answers to this, though, and I agree that what was presented at that meeting was thin on detail and thin on innovation. But I do think we have the resources to innovate a new model. But again, I would say, from a personal perspective, I want to represent everybody, and I'm trying to represent people that disagree with me about this personally. But my personal view of this would be, let's start having this conversation about what is hybrid for when we do get to our hybrid criteria, because we are going to get there eventually, or there'll be a vaccine, or there'll be more money from the federal government, or, I don't know when these things will happen and what order, but something, or more testing, something is going to happen that will change the landscape.
Yeah.
And at that point, I don't want us to move into the hybrid that we were imagining in the summer. I'd like us to move into a hybrid that is, like you say, an innovative response to the problem. But it's hard because we have enough public pressure that we end up just kind of continuing to relive this same decision over and over again. So, but if you have ideas, please share them. And I will push for more discussion of kind of what an innovative solution would look like, because I hear that from parents and teachers. And I hear very strongly from both of those groups that we, even from people that do want in-person instruction right away, I don't think they want it to look the way that it looks in other districts around us.
Thanks, Samuel and Bianca. Jared, you had a question or a comment?
It was a comment, is that based on what I've seen, my son is in kindergarten, so I'm sure the programs work at different levels and grades.
Mm-hmm.
But based on what I've seen, with as much interaction as we've had interaction with the teachers as much as would be, in my opinion, feasible. I mean, we had the tie-dye day, we had Los Muertos, where there was a little bit of interaction with the faculty, as well as with the parents and the students and whatnot. And then as far as like the Zoom meetings and the off the computer doing actual homework and videos, I think it's a really, really good mixture of with what we have as far as like online, with it being the virtual that we're kind of being forced upon. And so I just wanted to say that there might be, I was actually gonna, it's funny that popped up, but I was actually gonna talk about maybe a good idea might be to have a little bit more of a personable social media presence on like the Facebook page of the school, to have it so that the parents feel like it's a little bit more interactive with the more interactive with the parents and the teachers. The Eaglet is awesome too, and maybe posting some social, like some good tips to get it so that the kids don't feel socially, I guess the proper word would be socially inept, and having as much interaction as they possibly can. But I think having a little bit more interactivity on the social media side might help, or show, teachers doing something kind of funny, or making it so that they're not just these mythical teachers that are teaching programs, but also kind of showing that they're human beings and they can have fun and do some fun things too. That's just kind of some of the thoughts that I was having.
So Jared and I have been messaging, and we're talking about getting together on a call to come up with some social media content. And I've jotted down the Ascend program, the Snowball, the food fundraiser, teacher appreciation, some of the decision timeframes that are coming out of the district, and some other sort of topics. If anyone else is interested in like a subgroup, Trisha. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm happy to share resources that like community-based resources for families that are struggling, stuff like that.
I think that would be great. So maybe I'll add you, I'll send out a doodle poll, and we can have a little subgroup that can put some content together, because I know April posts it, but she certainly has more things to do with her time. If anybody else is interested, just let me know. So we've gone quite a bit over our normal time. I was going to ask if we could plan to schedule this meeting to run an hour and a half, which currently it's only scheduled for an hour. So with your permission, I will extend the appointment from 5:30 to 7 regularly. And then today we went longer, but that's okay. We appreciate Samuel for participating. As always, all of the teachers for participating, and all of you, and Jolie for volunteering on her first meeting. So thank you. If there's items that you'd like to talk about for next time, let us know. We'll put CERT back on the agenda. We'll also probably have a report back from the social media group. April, is there anything else we should be expecting to see next time?
Not that I can think of right offhand.
Great. And then teachers too, if there's something that you hear from your colleagues about how the SCC might help in any way, let us know. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.